Než začneme, mám malou prosbu. Snažím se dosáhnout hranice 1000 odběratelů. Je to pro mě velmi důležité číslo. Prosím, klikněte na tlačítko odebírat. Subscribe. Je to jen malé kliknutí, ale pro mě je to obrovská motivace pokračovat ve vytváření dalších videí. Moc vám všem děkuji. I never wanted to use my magic again. After my pack exiled me for possessing healing light they deemed too dangerous, I vowed to live quietly in this small forest cottage, alone and forgotten. But on my first night, as I reached beneath my bed for a fallen blanket, candlelight revealed something impossible. A werewolf pup, barely breathing, its grey and white fur matted with blood. My hands trembled as I knelt on the cold wooden floor. The pup's amber eyes met mine, filled with pain and fading hope. I knew what using my magic would mean. If anyone discovered I had healed again, the consequences could be worse than exile. My former pack had made their judgment clear. My light magic was unpredictable, uncontrollable, a threat to everyone around me. But as the pup whimpered, something inside me cracked. I could not let an innocent die to protect myself from fear. Golden light bloomed from my fingertips as I reached toward the trembling creature. The moment my magic touched its fragile body, warmth flooded the space between us. I poured everything I had into saving this life, knowing that this single act of compassion would change everything. Someone unexpected was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The cottage still smelled of strangers. Smoke from the hearth clung to the rafters, battling with the sharp tang of fresh cut pine and damp earth still clinging to my boots. Wind sighed against the shutters like a restless spirit, testing the hooks, searching for a way in. It matched the way my thoughts scraped against the hollow places inside my chest. Exile. The word echoed in my mind as I moved through the single room, touching each rough-hewn surface, as if claiming it might make it feel less like a cage. A narrow bed pressed against the far wall, a small table, 2 stools, shelves lined with herbs. I had brought in a bundle tied to my back. My entire life reduced to what I could carry, and what the council had not bothered to burn. "You're safer alone," they had said. They meant we're safer without you. I set the candle stub on the bedside table, the tiny flame throwing long, uncertain shadows across the floorboards. My hands were still raw from scrubbing. The pack had left the cottage abandoned for years, and dust had gathered like reproach on every surface. Cleaning it had given me something to do besides think of the moment my alpha had turned his back. Dangerous, they had called my magic. Unpredictable. I pressed my lips together and refused to remember the last patient I had healed. The way my light had flared brighter than ever before. The way fear had filled the room faster than gratitude. I had promised myself that night in the council hall that I would never call the light again. If they wanted me gone, then I would bury the gift that frightened them. I would live quietly, harmlessly, forgotten. The bed creaked when I sat, tired muscles protesting as I unlaced my boots. My fingers fumbled, clumsy with exhaustion. The candle threw a small pool of gold against the quilt. And for a moment, I let myself imagine that this cottage could become a kind of peace. No accusing eyes, no whispers behind my back, just the trees, the wind, and me. I shifted, reaching for the wool blanket folded at the foot of the bed. It slipped from my grasp, tumbling to the floor and disappearing into the dark gap beneath the frame. "Of course," I muttered. With a sigh, I slid off the mattress, the floorboards cold against my knees. The candle's flame bent as I lifted it, stretching toward the emptiness under the bed. Shadows crowded close, thick as ink. I lowered my head and peered into the darkness. 2 dull amber sparks stared back. My breath snagged. For a heartbeat, I thought some fragment of my magic had escaped, pooling there like molten gold. Then the shape around the eyes resolved. A small muzzle, a black nose, dry and cracked, grey and white fur, clumped and darkened with blood and dirt. Tiny paws tucked under a trembling body. A pup. A werewolf pup, no more than a few moons old, crammed beneath my bed as if the wooden frame could shield it from the entire world. The candle shook in my hand. Wax slashed down the side, burning my fingers before I remembered to move it back a little. The pup flinched at the shift of light, a frail whimper escaping its throat. Its sides rose and fell in shallow, ragged jerks, each breath a battle it was losing. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. No answer, of course. Only another weak sound, so small it barely disturbed the heavy air. I should have been angry at whoever had left it here, at the pack that had cast me out, at the merciless forest that gave no shelter to the weak. Instead, what flooded me was colder and sharper than anger. Fear not of the pup, but of myself. If I touched it, the light would answer. It always did. When life dangled by a thread, it would uncoil inside me, golden and hungry, desperate to mend torn flesh and knit bone to drag the dying back from the yawning dark. And if anyone felt that flare, if even a whisper of what I had done reached my former pack, exile might be the kindest punishment they chose next time. I leaned back on my heels, forcing myself to breathe slowly. I could do nothing. Let nature take its course. Close my eyes and pretend I never saw those failing breaths. The pup's gaze followed me, glazed and unfocused, but still trying to hold on. It tried to tuck itself deeper into the shadows and failed, its legs too weak to obey. The scent reached me then, blood, fear, and beneath it all, a trace of milk and warmth. A child's scent. I had held pups like this before, smiled as they tumbled across clinic floors, watched mothers weep with relief after my light-eased fevers and healed broken limbs. The council had praised me once, long before they decided my gift had grown too strong, too strange. "You will bring ruin down on us?" My alpha had hissed that last night, the air thick with incense and accusation. "There will be no more of your experiments." The pup shuddered, a thin whine slipping out, and the memory shattered. Experiment. That was what they had called it when I reached deeper than any healer before me and pulled an elder back from the brink. When my light had exploded bright enough to blind those watching, they had not seen the miracle, only the risk. "Breathe," I whispered, not sure if I spoke to the pup or to myself. Its chest hitched, stilled, hitched again, weaker. My choice narrowed to a blood's edge. If I turned away now, no one would know. A lone healer in an abandoned cottage, living out her exile in silence. No one would come asking about a pup that died quietly in the night. I could wrap its little body in a blanket, bury it beneath the pines, and convince myself I had done all I could. But that was a lie. And I had told myself enough of those to last a lifetime. The truth pressed hot behind my eyes as I crawled closer, heedless of the dust grinding into my skirts. The pup tried to recoil and could not. Its eyes fluttered shut, then dragged open again with effort, as if some stubborn piece of its spirit refused to surrender. "I know," I whispered. "I know it hurts." My hand hovered in the air, inches from its matted fur. The light stirred, sensing need, tasting it. Heat curled in my chest like a waking creature, stretching, testing the bars of the cage I had built inside myself. "No," I breathed, but my protest was thin. I thought of the council's faces, pale and hard under torchlight, of the way my alpha's voice had cracked, not with pity, but fear, when he pronounced my sentence, of the pack turning away as I walked between them, carrying my saturated satchel and nothing else. Then I looked at the pup. Its breaths were no longer jerks. They were pauses with effort in between, each one slower than the last. The fragile line that tethered it to this world was fraying. I could walk away, or I could be the person I had always been before fear twisted my reflection. My fingers closed the last of the distance. The moment my skin brushed its fur, the light broke free. It surged up my arm in a rush of heat, burning and sweet like sunlight after endless winter. My vision blurred at the edges as the cottage fell away. There was only the pup and the dark knot of pain binding its little body. I pressed my palm more firmly against its side, leaning into the connection. "Stay with me," I murmured. "Please." Golden brightness flooded from my chest, down my arm, into the pup. I felt torn, flesh knitting, ribs realigning, bruised lungs drawing in air more smoothly. Bones sang under my touch, vibrating with the echo of life returning. The effort ripped through me like a storm, tugging at every thread of strength I had left. Memories flickered in the light. Not mine, but the pup's. A larger shape snarling above it. Cold mud, running feet, a desperate scramble into the nearest shelter. My cottage driven by instincts that didn't yet understand words like alpha or enemy. Only pain and the need to hide. Safe, I whispered, though my voice shook. You're safe. The world narrowed further, edges dimming. My heart hammered once, twice, then slowed as the light demanded more. I gave it freely, pouring grief, anger, and all the love I had tried so hard to bury into that tiny trembling frame. Tears slid down my cheeks, falling onto the floorboards in silent drops. Just a little more, I begged. Then, beneath my hand, something changed. The frantic flutter of the pup's heartbeat steadied. Its breathing deepened. Each inhale smoother, less fragile. Warmth spread under my palm, pushing back the chill that had clung to its skin. The tight knot of pain loosened, dissolving into warmth and exhausted relief. The light, satisfied, began to recede, curling back into the hollow behind my ribs. I let it go with a shuddering exhale, every muscle trembling. The cottage came back into focus. The low ceiling, the crackle of the fire, the guttering candle, now just a stub of wax. I sagged onto my side, breath sawing in and out of my chest. The world tilted, then steadied. For a moment, all I could do was lie there on the floorboards, listening. The pup was breathing. Not the ragged gasps from before, but slow, even breaths. I pushed myself up on shaking elbows and drew it gently out from under the bed. It was lighter than it had any right to be. Fresh pink scars traced its flank, where open wounds had been moments before. Its eyes were closed now, lashes resting peacefully against its fur. It made a soft sound as I cradled it against my chest. Not a whimper, but a sigh. Trust given without question. My own heart clenched. "Your trouble already?" I murmured, sinking back until my shoulders pressed against the side of the bed. "You know that, little one?" It didn't answer, of course. It only nestled closer, nose burrowing into the crook of my arm, as if I had always been safe. Always been home. Exhaustion rolled over me in heavy waves. My limbs felt made of wet sand. The healing had taken more than I had to give, scraping my reserves down to nothing. I should have lifted us both onto the mattress. Should have thought of what would happen when dawn came and anyone realized I had broken my vow. Instead, I stayed where I was, sitting on the floor with my back to the bed and the pup sleeping against my heart. The candle died with a faint hiss, plunging the cottage into darkness, lit only by the last red glow of the hearth. My eyelids drifted shut as sleep dragged me under. One thought circled in the quiet, relentless as the wind outside. I had saved a life, and the world would not let that go unanswered. By the second morning, the cottage almost felt like it belonged to us. The pup followed me from hearth to table on clumsy paws, nosing at my skirts, collapsing in sudden heaps of sleep wherever a patch of sunlight found the floorboards. When he dreamed, his tiny legs twitched as if he were still running through the forest. But now the sounds he made were soft, contented huffs instead of broken whimpers. I tried not to name him. Names made things real. Names were promises, and I had already broken too many of those with my pack, with myself, with the light coiled inside my chest. So I called him Little One and Trouble, and pretended that wasn't the same as claiming him. "Stay out of the herbs," I scolded gently as he sniffed at the woven baskets by the hearth. He looked back at me, head tilting, ears too big for his round face. Then, with all the solemnity of a prince accepting a crown, he toppled onto his side and went to sleep on my bare feet. Warmth seeped through my bones. The ache left by exile eased in small, unexpected places. The way the cottage no longer echoed quite so much. The way my laughter startled me when he tried to attack a dust mote dancing in a shaft of light. I still woke in the night with my heart pounding, fingers curled as if holding a life that was slipping away. But each time I reached out and found soft fur and slow, steady breathing. I had saved him. The world had not ended. On the second afternoon, rain drummed against the roof, turning the path outside to slick brown ribbons. I stirred a pot of broth over the fire, glancing down every few moments to make sure the pup hadn't wandered too close to the flames. He lay on his back, paws splayed, snoring softly. This is temporary, I told myself, though no one else was listening. He'll heal, and then what? I could hardly send him back into the forest alone, nor could I march him to the nearest border and ask the patrol of whichever pack found us if they had misplaced the pup. The thought of other wolves made my stomach tighten. I ladled broth into a wooden bowl, the scent of herbs and bone filling the small room, and nearly dropped it when a sound split the steady rhythm of rain. A knock. Not the hesitant, rapid tapping of a traveler seeking shelter, not the familiar code of any packmate I had once known, but 3 measured, resonant blows that made the door frame shiver. The pup shot upright, ears pricked, a low, uncertain sound rumbling in his chest. My pulse lurched hot and fast. No one should be here. I set the bowl down with care and wiped my hands on my apron, palms suddenly slick. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I had not heard, but those 3 knocks had not been a request. They had been a summons. The pup padded to my side, pressing his warm flank against my ankle. I drew a breath, then another, and crossed the room. The iron latch felt colder than it should beneath my fingers. "Who is it?" I called, proud that my voice only trembled a little. Silence for a heartbeat, then a reply, deep and clear, carrying easily through the wood. Jasmine, daughter of Rowan, opened the door. He spoke my name the way a judge might read it from a scroll formally, stripped of affection. The pup whined softly, his small body pressed harder against my leg, as if trying to hide me with his own. I swallowed. Only one kind of wolf spoke with that authority. Only one would know my parentage without introduction or question. The Alpha King. My fingers tightened on the latch. I considered for a brief wild moment, pretending to be someone else. A wandering herbalist who had never heard of Jasmine, never heard of exile, never heard the word dangerous, breathed in the same sentence as her own name. But lies would not hold against the king's gaze. I lifted the latch and pulled the door open. He filled the doorway like a storm. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in travel-worn leathers that did nothing to soften the sheer force of his presence. Dark hair damp from the rain clung to his temples, and droplets glittered on the wolf fur cloak fastened at his throat. His eyes, grey, sharp, assessing, swept over me once before dropping to the small shape half hidden behind my skirts. The air seemed to thin between one breath and the next. He looked younger than I had expected, closer to my age than to my father's. But there was nothing untested about him. Power coiled around him like a second cloak, invisible but unmistakable. I had felt lesser alphas before, their dominance pressing like a hand at the back of the neck. This was different. This was the weight of a crown carried for years. "Your Majesty," I managed, lowering my gaze out of instinct more than respect. Old habits still clung to my spine. "May I come in?" he asked. It was phrased as a question, but we both knew the answer did not matter. Still, something rebellious and wounded in me straightened. "This cottage is mine," I said quietly. "For now, at least." A pause. Then, to my surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched, as if some stray amusement had escaped before he could leash it. "Then, as your guest, I asked permission." Rain pattered more insistently on the roof. The pup nudged my leg again, sensing the tension, but not understanding its shape. I stepped back. "Very well. Come in, Your Majesty." He crossed the threshold without hesitation. The room seemed smaller with him inside it. I closed the door, suddenly acutely aware of the clutter, the herbs hanging in bundles, the single bed, the extra blanket folded in the corner where the pup usually slept. Those grey eyes swept the space once, taking in everything, then settled on the pup. The small wolf stared back, tail tucked, but head lifted as if trying to decide whether to be brave or afraid. "Trevor!" Because it must be him. There was no other. He knelt without warning. The Alpha King, ruler of the central packs, dropped to one knee on my worn floorboards and extended his hand toward the pup, palm up. He did not reach to grab, did not command. He simply waited. The pup sniffed, inching forward, paws silent on the wood. After a moment, he pressed his nose against Trevor's fingers. Relief flashed across the king's face, quick and fierce, before his expression smoothed again. "He is alive," Trevor said, more to himself than to me. "Thank the moon." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. "How did you know he was here?" His gaze lifted to mine, steady and unflinching, because something impossible tore across my territory 2 nights ago. My mouth went dry. "I felt it," he continued. "Every alpha did. A flare of healing magic strong enough to bend the wind. We would have sent scouts in any case. But then I caught this little one's scent, tangled in it." His hand brushed lightly over the pup's healed side. "One of my missing? Missing?" The word snagged in my thoughts. "He is yours?" I asked. "He is my responsibility," Trevor answered. "My brother's son." A shadow crossed his features, there and gone again. "He disappeared during an attack on one of our outer patrols. We thought—" His jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter what we thought. You changed that." I stared at the pup, at the faint pink line where torn flesh had once gaped. My light, his nephew, a king's attention crashing like a wave into the quiet shore of my exile. "I didn't know," I said softly. "I found him here, hiding under my bed, and you healed him." Not a question. I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Yes." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the ground would hold or crumble. "My pack exiled me for that magic," I added, "because he deserved the whole truth, and because some stubborn part of me refused to let others tell my story first. They called it dangerous, unpredictable. I swore I would never use it again." "Yet you did," Trevor said. "There was a dying child under my bed." My voice sharpened, shame burned away by the memory of those failing breaths. I could not pretend I hadn't seen him. Something in his expression shifted, a small easing at the corners of his eyes. "Good, Healer," he said simply. The single word stole the air from my lungs. "Good attitude," I repeated. "You broke your vow," he said, "to save a life. I would call that an improvement over the vows that let a child die to preserve pride." I had braced for anger, suspicion, a lecture on laws and boundaries. Instead, he offered approval. It left me more off balance than any threat would have. "You are not afraid?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Of what I did? Of what I am?" His gaze flicked once to the herbs, the neat stacks of folded cloth, the carefully tended fire. "I am cautious," he said. "Any power that can heal like that can likely harm just as deeply. But fear—" He shook his head. "No. Fear is for those who see only what might go wrong, never what might be made right." The pup chose that moment to butt his head insistently against my calf, as if seconding the sentiment. Trevor's mouth softened. "You saved my nephew," he said. "Whatever your past, whatever your exile, that is a debt I cannot ignore." My throat tightened. "I did not do it for a debt, Your Majesty." "I know." His voice lowered, gentler, which is why it matters. He rose smoothly to his feet, gathering the pup into his arms with surprising ease. But the small wolf relaxed against his chest, as if this were familiar. Of course it was, I realized. He had known this scent long before he knew mine. "I must take him home," Trevor said. "His parents are." He hesitated, then settled on, "waiting." The word carried more weight than it should, but I was too busy trying to steady myself to examine it. "You will be careful?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. He looked genuinely taken aback. "With him always?" "No," I said. "With you? Whoever hurt him may try again." For the first time, something like real warmth lit his eyes. "You worry for a king you've known for less than an hour?" "I worry for anyone who carries a child like that," I said quietly. His gaze held mine for a long heartbeat. Then he inclined his head, a gesture that felt dangerously close to respect. "I will be careful," he promised. He stepped toward the door. The pup nestled against him, tiny claws hooked in the leather of his tunic. Panic fluttered in my chest, sudden and sharp. The cottage felt as if someone were stripping it of light with every step he took. "Wait!" I blurted. He paused, hand on the latch. "His side," I said, voice barely steady. "If the scar darkens, if he begins to limp or cough, send word." The healing was rushed. I swallowed. I gave all I could, but some injuries take longer to understand. Trevor considered me for a moment, then nodded once. "I will," he said. "And Jasmine?" "Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you." The words were simple, but they landed with unexpected force. No council had said that when I dragged their elder back from the brink. No alpha had spoken it when I spent nights bent over fevered pups. Gratitude had become a foreign language in my old life. Now it was spoken by a king in my doorway. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant smoke. I wrapped my arms around myself as he stepped out onto the slick path. For a moment he stood there, rain needling his hair, the pup safe in his hold. Then he shifted, the faintest hint of a smile touching his mouth. "He seems fond of you," he said. "If he grows strong, I may bring him to visit." "If you wish." The offer hurt more than a clean break. "I would like that," I whispered. He inclined his head once more and walked into the rain, disappearing between the trees with the easy stride of a wolf who knew every root and stone. I watched until the forest swallowed them both. When I closed the door, the cottage felt unbearably quiet. The empty space where the pup had slept beside the hearth yawned wider than the room itself. I crossed to it anyway, sinking to my knees and pressing my palm flat to the still warm floorboards. "He is safe," I told the silence. "He is home." But as the rain softened to a drizzle and the fire settled into embers, another thought coiled beneath the reassurance. Quiet and relentless, the Alpha King had felt my magic. He had followed it, and whatever exile I thought I had chosen for myself, the world beyond these walls had just reminded me that it still knew my name. 4 days after the king left, the cottage forgot how to breathe. Silence pulled in the corners like standing water. No small paws pattered across the floor. No clumsy snout nudged my elbow while I worked. I found myself turning again and again to speak to someone who was no longer there. "Hold the basket steady," I almost said, as I gathered herbs. "Leave that alone," I nearly scolded when the wind rattled the drying racks. I bit the words back each time. They tasted like foolishness and loss. I told myself this was what I had wanted. Solitude, a quiet life at the edge of the forest, where no one looked to me for miracles or blamed me for them. The ache in my chest insisted otherwise. By the 4th evening, storm clouds had swallowed the sky. The air hung heavy, thick with the promise of rain. I banked the fire and sat at the small table, grinding feverfew leaves in a mortar just for something to do. My hands moved automatically. My thoughts wandered to a palace I had never seen, to a pup whose heartbeat I had once held between my palms. I wondered if he remembered me. The first knock I almost ignored, convinced it was the wind. The second shook the door hard enough to rattle the latch. My pestle slipped in my grip, grinding into silence. A shiver ran down my spine, not of fear exactly, but of recognition. I wiped my hands on my apron and rose, the room spinning briefly as I did. I had not slept well since the king's visit. Dreams of golden light and grey eyes chased me through the night. At the door, I hesitated only a breath before lifting the latch. Trevor filled the doorway again, but this time the storm was behind him, as well as in him. Rain streaked his hair and cloak. Shadows carved deep lines around his eyes. He looked as if he had not slept either. In his arms, wrapped in a familiar wool blanket, the pup squirmed and wailed, a thin, keening sound that scraped raw across my nerves. "Jasmine," Trevor said, and his voice steady. "The last time we met was frayed at the edges. I need your help." The pup's cry broke on a shallow sob. My heart lurched. "Come in," I said, stepping aside without insisting on courtesy this time. He crossed the threshold in 2 long strides. The moment the door closed behind him, The pup's nose lifted, frantic, scenting the air. The sound it made shifted from a wild wail to something smaller, questioning. "It's all right," I murmured, though he was not looking at me yet. "You're safe." Trevor's gaze flicked to my face, then back to the wriggling bundle. "He hasn't been," he said quietly. "Not truly." He laid the pup on my bed, as gently as if he were made of spun glass. The blanket fell back enough to reveal 2 prominent ribs beneath soft fur. 4 days should not have been enough to change him so much. Yet the bright curiosity I remembered had dulled, swallowed by exhaustion and distress. I moved toward him as if pulled by a string. "What happened?" My fingers hovered above the pup's head, not quite touching. "Was he injured again?" "No." The word came out like a curse. "That's the problem. He is not sick. Not according to every healer in my palace." The pup turned his head toward me, eyes unfocused, but searching. His cries faltered into hiccuping whines, each one weaker than the last. "From the moment we left your cottage," he cried, Trevor said. "At first, we thought it was the journey, the shock. But he did not stop. Day, night, he screamed until his throat went raw. We tried everything. Milk, stew, lullabies his mother used to sing. His jaw tightened. I held him until my arms shook. My sister did the same. He pushed away from all of us. Guilt, sharp and senseless, stabbed under my ribs. "You should have told me sooner. I thought he would settle," he admitted, "that he only needed time." His gaze dropped to the pup's narrow chest. By the second day he refused to eat. By the third, he would not sleep unless someone wrapped him in this. He brushed a hand over the blanket. My blanket, the one I had grabbed off the bed to shield him while he lay on the cold floor, light pouring through him. Realization washed through me, slow and heavy. "He calms when he smells this?" I asked. "For a little while," Trevor said, "but the moment we remove it, or the scent fades even a little, he wakes and begins again." As if to prove the point, the pup nudged my wrist with his nose, inhaling deeply. But the frantic edge left his whining. His tail gave a weak, hopeful twitch. "What did your healer say?" I asked. "That there is no poison in his blood, no broken bone, no fever. His lungs are clear. His heart is strong." Trevor's hands clenched at his sides. They have no more answers to give me. "And you?" I kept my eyes on the pup, afraid of what I might see in his. "I have one answer," he said. "I simply do not know what to do with it." The pup made a small noise then, a sound that snagged my attention more keenly than any argument. He breathed. Just that. 2 broken syllables, but they echoed through the room like thunder. My throat closed. "Did you hear?" Trevor asked, voice low. Perhaps it was nothing. A coincidence. Denial felt fragile even as I spoke it. "He has been making that sound for 2 days, Trevor said. "My sister swears it is a name. The palace staff has begun to whisper that he is calling a ghost." He took a step closer. The exhaustion in his eyes laid bare. "But he is not calling a ghost, is he?" The pup head-butted my hand again, as if impatient for me to accept what everyone else already knew. My heart answered before my mind could catch up. I sank to sitting on the edge of the bed, lifting him carefully into my arms. The moment his small body settled against my chest, he sighed and went limp with relief. The dreadful tension that had strung through him like wire eased all at once. "I think," I said slowly, "he is calling me." Trevor exhaled as if someone had removed the blade from between his ribs. "So do I," he said. For a few breaths, we simply watched the pup's sides rise and fall. His eyes had already drifted closed, lashes trembling once before settling. The cottage seemed to exhale with him, tension leaking out through the gaps in the shutters. "You see why I came," Trevor said at last. "Yes." My fingers stroked absently over the healed scar at the pup's flank. "But I do not understand why it is like this. Is it because of your magic?" he asked. "Maybe." The word tasted uncertain. When I healed him, the light went deep, deeper than I meant it to. I poured everything I had into him, more than I should have. I hesitated. Sometimes when a healer touches a patient that closely, a connection forms enough to let us sense when their condition changes. But it has never been like this. "A bond," Trevor murmured, "between healer and pup." "Yes," I admitted. But bonds do not usually starve a child of comfort from everyone else. He considered that, pacing one slow step away, then back. The lines of exhaustion around his mouth seemed carved there. I do not know what he needs, he said quietly. Only that when he is away from you, he declines. And when he is near you, he breathes like this. Steady, peaceful, safe. The pup nuzzled closer into the hollow beneath my collarbone, as if he had been made to fit there. "What are you asking of me, Your Majesty?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. He did not stand tall this time, did not cloak his request in command. Instead, he came to stand in front of me, close enough that I could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the way his shoulders drooped under the weight of a burden he could not shift. "I am asking you, Hidare, he said, to come with me to the palace for a time, until we understand what this is and how to ease it." His gaze dropped to the pup, then back to me. "He is fading, Jasmine, not because he is sick, but because something in him has decided he cannot live without you." My first instinct was to recoil. Palace, courts, counselors whose opinions could shape lives. I imagined their faces when they learned who I was. An exiled healer with a history of magic that frightened her own pack. I had barely survived being judged once. I wasn't sure I could endure it again. "You know what they will say," I whispered. "Your people, your advisors, they will call me dangerous." "Some already do," he said with a wryness that surprised me. "They called you dangerous the moment they felt your power flare. They have been pacing like caged wolves since I left to fetch him." His expression sobered. "But this is my kingdom, my decision, and I will not let fear dictate whether a child lives or dies." I looked down at the pup. At the small warm weight, most would not think twice about losing. Yet to Trevor, to the family who waited in some distant palace, he was everything. And to me, he was the first living creature in months to look at me as if I were not a monster, not a threat, but a harbor. "You could find another way," I said faintly. "Another healer, another solution." "I have tried," he answered. "All I have accomplished is making him suffer longer." He dropped to one knee, bringing his gaze level with mine. "I am not asking as a king now. I am asking as an uncle who does not know how to stop his nephew from starving himself from grief." The honesty in his eyes undid me more thoroughly than any command could have. Fear whispered of council chambers, and whispers of old accusations dragged into new light. But another voice spoke louder. The one that had driven me to place my hands on a dying pup despite my vow. The one that refused to see suffering and remain still. If I refused, he would leave. He would carry the pup back to a palace, where he would cry himself hoarse and waste away wrapped in a blanket that smelled like a ghost. If I went, everything might change again. I tightened my hold, feeling the steady thrum of the pup's heart against my ribs. "I have nothing the world has not already taken," I said quietly. "If my presence can help him live, then I cannot say no." Relief crashed over Trevor's features, raw and unmasked. For a moment, he simply closed his eyes, as if bracing against the force of it. "Thank you, he said, and the words shook. "You will not be alone there. I give you my word." Promises from kings were dangerous things. I had seen words used as weapons often enough. Yet something in his tone, some blend of steel and gentleness, made me believe he would break himself against his own walls before breaking that vow. "When do we leave?" I asked. "As soon as you are ready," he replied. "Every hour matters." I looked around the cottage, my few bundles of herbs, the bed that still held the indent of my solitary sleep, the walls that had heard my silence and my whispered questions, and had no answers to give. It had never truly become home. Not the way 4 days with the pup had. "I will need only a little time," I said. "Some herbs, clothes, bandages. The rest can wait." He rose, inclining his head in acknowledgement. "I will see to the horses." When he stepped back into the storm, the wind rushed in around him, carrying the scent of rain and distant smoke. I gathered what I needed with quick, efficient movements, the pup remaining nestled in one arm, unwilling to be put down, even for a heartbeat. as I tied the last satchel and slung it over my shoulder. I paused in the doorway, looking back once more at the small rough room that had been meant to be my whole world. "Goodbye," I whispered. The cottage said nothing. The forest did. A gust of wind swept through the trees, bending them toward the path where Trevor waited. I stepped out into the rain, the pup's fur soaking up the droplets, his nose tucked under my chin. Trevor helped me onto the horse. As if I were something breakable, he refused to see shattered. When he mounted his own, our gazes met over the space between us. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I am coming anyway." A small smile ghosted across his lips. "That will be enough." We rode out together, leaving the cottage behind. The pup dozed against my heart, breath steady, as if he had finally made his choice. And without quite meaning to, I had made mine. The palace rose out of the mist like something from an old prayer. Stone towers crowned with banners, high walls slick with rain, torchlight burning in golden veins along the battlements. For a moment, as our horses passed beneath the iron portcullis, all I could do was grip the pup and stare. I had grown up in a modest packhold, all timber and thatch and open courtyards. This place felt carved from the bones of the mountain itself. The courtyard stones were so smooth they shone, and the air hummed with wolves, guards, servants, messengers moving with practiced purpose. Every eye turned to us, or rather to me. I felt their gazes like pricks of ice along my skin, heard the whispers rising in our wake. That must be her, the one with the light. They exiled her, didn't they? For dangerous magic. The words threaded through the clatter of hooves and the hiss of rain. I tried to keep my shoulders straight, my head level, but old shame stirred heavy and familiar. The pup shifted restlessly in my arms, sensing my tension. I bent my head, murmuring nonsense against his fur until his breathing steadied again. Trevor swung down from his horse and reached up to help me dismount. His hand closed around my elbow, steady and warm. "They talk," he said under his breath, "because they do not yet know you. Let them. Their opinions will catch up to the truth." Easy for a king to say, I thought, but I held my tongue. He had brought me here, knowing full well what storms it would steer. That counted for something. Inside, the palace swallowed us whole. The entrance hall soared upward into shadow, its arched ceiling painted with silver wolves running across a midnight sky. Chandeliers of antler and glass spilled light over marble floors veined like frozen rivers. Tapestries lined the walls, battles won, treaties signed, kings crowned, all watching us pass with woven eyes. Grand, yes. Overwhelming, absolutely. But beneath the beauty lay edges, guards at every archway. Counselors clustered in alcoves with eyes like hawks, their sense pricked at my nose. Peppery suspicion, cold stone disapproval, a flicker of curiosity quickly smothered. "Your Majesty." A man stepped forward from the cluster near the far stair. He was older than Trevor, his hair iron grey, his posture stiff with authority. Others fanned out around him, their clothes rich but practical, the careful neutral expressions of wolves used to politics. "Counsel," my instincts whispered. "Lord Marius," Trevor acknowledged. "You have been busy these last days, only as duty demands," Marius replied smoothly. His gaze slid to me, cool and assessing. "We felt your return, sire, and something else." I see now what it was. His attention snagged on the pup tucked against my chest. The little wolf was awake now, but quiet, eyes half-lidded, as if the sheer closeness of my heartbeat was enough to soothe him. "This is the child?" Marius asked. "My nephew," Trevor said, a hint of warning beneath the words. Marius inclined his head slightly. "We are grateful he is found." Then after a beat too long and the healer, not my name, just a role wrapped in all the rumors they had gathered in my absence. "Jasmine," Trevor corrected, the word firm as a stone placed between us. "She has agreed to help us understand what binds her to the pup." "Of course." Marius's politeness thinned at the edges. "The council will wish to discuss the implications of that bond and of her presence here later," Trevor said. "For now, she and the child need rest." A faint muscle jumped in Marius's jaw, but he bowed. "As you command, sire." We moved on. The corridors twisted like veins through the heart of the palace. Servants stepped quickly out of our way, eyes lowered, yet not blind. Snatches of murmured speculation trailed behind us. I caught fragments, exiled, unnatural, king's pet, and tightened my hold on the pup until he grumbled in protest. Breathe, Trevor said softly without looking back. You are not on trial here, Jasmine. Forgive me if it feels similar, I replied equally quiet. He didn't argue. At last, we stopped before a carved wooden door, painted with a running wolf and a crescent moon. Even before Trevor opened it, I knew what room lay beyond. The air tasted of milk and sleep, of soft wool and lullaby bees, long unsung, the nursery. The moment the door swung inward, the pup tensed. From inside came the thin, rasping cry I had grown used to hearing only in memory. It was deeper now, horror with overuse, filled with the raw edge of panic. In the cradle near the window, another pup thrashed, wrapped in my blanket. Not another, I realized with a jolt. The same I had left with him in my arms. I returned to find some echo left behind the scent ghost, a comfort that no longer comforted. A woman stood over the cradle. Exhausted eyes shadowed, hands hovering helplessly above the wailing child. When she saw Trevor, her shoulders sagged with something like relief and fear braided together. He will not stop, she whispered. He slept for a moment when I wrapped him in the wool, but then the scent faded and he woke again. I do not know what else to. Her gaze found me. Hope flickered there, sharp and desperate. Trevor stepped aside. Let her, he said. For one heartbeat, the room held its breath. The pup in my arms, my pup, some stubborn corner of my heart insisted, lifted his head. His twin in the cradle stilled mid-cry, nose flaring. Then, with a sound that was almost a sob, the child in the cradle lurched toward the edge, tiny hands grasping air. Ja! He choked. The pup in my arms answered with a high, desperate whine. I did not remember deciding to move, only that suddenly I was at the cradle, transferring the pup I'd carried into it, and lifting the other out. We swapped them like matched halves of something broken, and the world clicked. The crying stopped. Just stopped. The pup pressed now against my chest, let out a trembling sigh, burrowing into the hollow beneath my chin. His body, strung tight as a bowstring moments before, went boneless with relief. Within heartbeats, his breathing steadied into the slow, even rhythm of true sleep. Silence rang louder than the wails had. I sagged onto the nearby rocking chair because my legs would not hold me upright. The woman, Trevor's sister, I realized belatedly, seeing echoes of his features in hers, covered her mouth with her hand, shoulders shaking. I tried, she whispered. I held him. I sang. But he never. No one could, Trevor said quietly. Until now. He stood just inside the nursery door, one shoulder resting against the frame. His expression was complicated. Wonder. Yes. Concern. Absolutely. And something else softer and more dangerous, threaded through both. He wasn't looking at the pup. He was looking at me. Under that gaze, the bond became a physical thing. I felt it as a thread of warmth stretching between my chest and the small body in my arms, humming faintly in time with his heartbeat. Not a mate bond, not the wild, overwhelming force the stories whispered about. This was different, gentler, but no less real. A healer's tether, perhaps, deepened by the way my light had soaked into him when death hovered close. I don't understand it, I admitted, stroking his fur with one hand, as if we had done this all our lives. But it is there. Trevor pushed away from the door and crossed the room. Every movement measured. Will it hurt him? He asked. This bond? I shook my head slowly. No. If anything, it anchors him. Gives him something to reach for when the world is too loud. And you? He asked. Will it hurt you? The question startled me more than it should have. No one at my old pack had asked that when they dragged me before the council. Their concern had been for risk, for what my magic might cost them, not what it already cost me. I bowed my head over the pup, breathing in the scent of fur and milk and faint wood smoke. It will change things, I said. I will feel when he is afraid, when he is hurt, when he is near. But pain, I brushed my thumb over his tiny ear. If this is pain, it is one I can bear. His sister exhaled shakily behind Trevor. Then he must stay close to her, she said. We cannot ask him to survive without what keeps him calm. Trevor nodded once, decision settling on his shoulders like a mantle. Agreed. He turned to me. You will need rooms near the nursery. Comfort, space. Anything you require, you will have. The words made the room tilt. Rooms plural. Space, in a palace, where every room meant something. Signaled importance, or lack of it. A place carved out in the heart of his home for an exiled healer with a tarnished name. Trev, his sister began, alarm flickering over her face. The council will. The council, he said, not raising his voice, yet somehow silencing the air. Advises, I decide. My nephew lives today because Jasmine defied fear. She will not be punished for it in my house. Heat burned behind my eyes. I bent my head so neither of them would see. You are not a prisoner, he added more quietly, addressing me now. If you wish to leave when he is stronger, you may, but for as long as he needs you, I ask you to stay. Ask, not order. The distinction wrapped itself gently around the bruised places inside me. I looked up and met his gaze. Wonder still lived there, and concern and something like respect. I will stay, I said, voice rough, for as long as he needs. He held my eyes a heartbeat longer, as if weighing the shape of those words. Then he inclined his head, not as a king accepting a pledge, but as a man acknowledging a choice. Then welcome to the palace, Jasmine, he said softly. We are in your debt. The pup sighed again, pressing closer, as if sealing a pact none of us yet fully understood. Outside, beyond the thick stone walls, the storm began to break. Rain softening to a gentle patter against the windows. Inside, I sat within the circle of palace walls, with a sleeping pup in my arms, and a king who had just tethered me to his world, as surely as my magic had tethered his nephew to me. For the first time since my exile, the future did not look like an empty road. It looked like a door that had just cautiously opened. The palace learned our rhythm faster than I did. By the end of the week, servants no longer stared outright when I crossed the corridors with the pup in my arms. They stepped around us with careful efficiency, pretending not to notice how his small nose tucked into the hollow of my throat, or how his ears pricked whenever Trevor's footsteps sounded at the far end of the hall. Trevor came often, sometimes in full leathers, smelling of rain and steel. Fresh from the training grounds, sometimes in soft shirts and ink-stained fingers, dragged away from ledgers by a nurse's frantic message that the pup was restless. Each time, his shoulders loosened a fraction when he stepped into the nursery and saw us there. Me, in the rocking chair. The pup sprawled across my lap, like a small snoring king. He has grown, Trevor said one evening, dropping wearily into the chair opposite mine. Candlelight carved the hollows beneath his eyes into shadows. You said that yesterday, I replied. It was true yesterday, he said. It is truer now. As if on cue, the pup kicked in his sleep, paws jerking. His tail thumped once against my thigh. I smoothed a hand down his back, letting a trickle of warmth seep from my fingers. Not full light, just enough to soothe. Trevor watched the movement, his gaze softening. He settles faster with you, he said. He settles fastest with both of us, I answered before I could stop myself. His mouth curved quick and rofal. He is greedy then, wants the entire world within reach. I did not say that to him. We were the world right now. I only stroked the pup's fur and tried to ignore the way my heart stuttered whenever Trevor's laughter, still rare, loosened something in the room. The nights were worst for both of us. For the pup, nightmares came on silent pause. He would jolt awake, trembling, tiny claws digging into my arm, as if some unseen threat still chased him. I held him through each wave, humming nonsense melodies, letting the bond carry calm into the frantic corners of his mind. For Trevor, nightmares wore different shapes. More than once, I woke to find him standing in the nursery doorway long after the palace had gone to sleep. He never spoke at first, only watched us with an expression I didn't know how to name, as if reassuring himself we were still there. "Bad dreams?" I asked softly. "One such night." He started, caught, then huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. "Memories," he admitted. "The border raid. The moment we realized he was gone." I closed my eyes and see my brother's face every time. Grief sat differently on him than on me. Mine had hollowed me, turned me inward. His sharpened him like a blade honed too fine. Yet here, in the dim quiet of the nursery, some of that edge dulled. "Come sit," I said, nodding to the bench by the window. He hesitated, then crossed the room and lowered himself onto the cushion. For a while, we said nothing. The only sounds the pop of cooling embers and the soft sighs of the sleeping pup between us, head pillowed on my thigh, hind paws bumping against Trevor's leg. "You should sleep," I said. "A king who spends his nights pacing the halls will fall from his horse by midday." "A risk, certainly," he murmured. "My council would be horrified. Your council is horrified by many things," I said, then winced. "Forgive me. That was honest," he finished, "and accurate." Silence stretched, not entirely comfortable, but no longer sharp. "They want you gone," he said after a moment. The word stung despite not being a surprise. I focused on the rise and fall of the pup's flank, counting breaths to keep mine steady. "Of course they do," I said. "They have heard only stories. Stories of an exiled healer who nearly tore the veil with her magic," he said. "Of a council so alarmed they banished their own to appease their fear. Of light bright enough to shake the border wards when you saved my nephew." He paused. "Fear travels faster than truth." "And truth?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, then really looked as if measuring me against every rumor. "Truth sits in front of me, with a child who would be dead if not for her." He said, "Truth keeps that same child alive now, at the cost of her own peace. My council does not like that truth, because they did not choose it." I swallowed my throat suddenly tight. "What do they say?" I asked, though I already knew pieces from overheard whispers. "Dangerous, unnatural temptation for enemies. They say you are a risk we cannot afford," he replied. "That harboring an exile makes us look weak. That if your former pack cast you out, there must be a reason strong enough we should follow it." The familiar blade of shame pressed against my ribs. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "There was a reason," I said. "It simply was not the one they tell." His attention sharpened. "Then tell me yours." I had not spoken the whole story aloud since the night I left home. The words felt rusted in my throat, but his steady, patient regard made them loosen. My magic was always bright. I began slowly. Even when I was small, I could knit cuts closed with a touch, ease fevers with a breath. At first, they praised it, called me blessed. I let my fingers curl gently in the pup's fur, anchoring myself. Then, an elder fell sick. His heart failed, his lungs filled. No tonic helped, no herb touched the rot eating him from inside. I remembered the smell of incense and sweat, the press of bodies around the bed. "They begged me to try," I said. I warned them it might be too late, that pulling him back would require more power than I had ever used. They insisted. So I reached. The memory burned behind my eyes. Even now, the light answered. I whispered, stronger than ever. It tore through me, poured into him. For a moment, I thought it would take us both, but he lived. He sat up, breathing easy, laughing while everyone stared. Trevor's voice was very soft, and then someone screamed. The sound still rang in my dreams, the high, ragged terror of those who had wanted a miracle, but not like this. They said no healer should have that much power, I continued. That if I could drag a man back from the brink, I could just as easily decide who should die. They said light that bright would draw attention from enemies, from spirits, from things beyond our borders. I tried to explain I had only answered their plea, that I hadn't meant to reach so far. But fear does not listen once it has found a target. I smiled without humor. The next night, they called a council. They did not ask for my side. They declared me exile before I could speak more than a sentence. The room blurred. I blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. I left because staying would have meant shackles or worse, I said. I told myself it was mercy, that at least this way they did not have to watch me. But the truth is simpler. I looked down at the pup, at the way his tiny paw had unconsciously come to rest against my wrist. They were afraid of what they did not understand, so they threw it into the woods and hoped it would not find its way back. Trevor was silent long enough that I began to wish I had kept the story buried. Then his hand moved, resting lightly on the pup's back, his fingers a breath away from mine. They were fools, he said. The certainty in his tone startled me into a laugh that sounded more like a sob. You were not there, I said. I know enough, he replied. A council that would rather bury power than learn to work with it is a council that will always choose fear over growth. His jaw tightened. I have sat through enough sessions this week to recognize the pattern. You mean your council? Yes, he did not flinch from it. They warned me daily that keeping you here invites trouble, that your former pack may use your exile as an excuse to question my judgment, that other alphas will whisper about a king enthralled by a dangerous healer. I stared at our almost touching hands. And are you enthralled? His mouth quirked. Not in the way they mean. Heat crept up my neck. I was suddenly very aware of the narrowness of the bench, of the solid warmth of him on the other side of the sleeping pup. They want me to send you away, he continued, to thank you politely, escort you to the border, and wash our hands of the entire matter. A familiar dread rose, sour and sharp. Will you? He turned then fully, so that there was nothing between his gaze and mine but candlelight and the soft rise and fall of his nephew's breathing. No, he said. The word landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through every fear I had nursed since crossing his gates. You are certain that is wise? I asked. Because someone in this palace ought to ask the question his council kept flinging at him. Perhaps not, he admitted. But it is right. His eyes darkened. I will not abandon the person who saved my nephew, because frightened men are more loyal to protocol than to justice. My chest tightened, the ache a strange swelling thing. Kings have lost thrones for less, I murmured. Then my throne is more fragile than I believed, he said. If it cannot bear the weight of one act of gratitude, it is unworthy of the seat it stands on. He spoke with a calm that shook me more than any anger would have. There was no bravado in it, only a simple unyielding choice. This will cost you, I said. Keeping you? He tilted his head. Yes, so would sending you away. His gaze dropped briefly to the pup. To him most of all, the pup sighed in his sleep, as if agreeing. The Trevor's hand shifted, bridging the last inch to cover mine where it rested on soft fur. The contact was warm, steady, utterly deliberate. You are not a burden to be managed, Jasmine, he said quietly. You are a healer who did what no one else could. As long as I rule here, you will not stand alone against their whispers. His fingers squeezed mine once before he let go. Something warm and treacherous unfurled in my chest, spreading through the cracks exile had left. It was not the blazing rush of magic, but it was no less powerful. Trust, I realized, dazed, not demanded, not coerced, offered. Thank you, I said, because anything more would have broken my voice. He smiled then, small and tired and real. Get some rest, he murmured, rising. Both of you. Tomorrow I have 3 counselors to remind that fear is not law. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it is worth, he added, looking back, I am glad your pack made the mistake they did. I blinked. Glad. If they had not cast you out, he said simply, my nephew would be dead. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving me in the dim hush of the nursery. The pup's steady heartbeat thrumming under my hand. His fierce protection wrapped around me as tangibly as any cloak. For the first time since my exile, the weight on my shoulders felt shared, and in the quiet, something in me, small and cautious, but very much alive, began to hope. The weeks that followed did not feel like falling in love. They felt like learning to breathe again. Mornings began with small paws in my ribs and a wet nose in my ear. The pup, Trevor's nephew, though everyone simply called him Little Wolf for now, had decided my bed was his territory. If I tried to rise without him, he protested with wounded yips until I scooped him up and carried him to the nursery where Trevor usually waited. He was almost always there before us. Sometimes he sat on the floor in full armor, boots dusty from dawn patrol, a stack of reports forgotten at his side as he let Little Wolf maul his gloved hands. Other mornings he leaned against the window bench in a simple shirt, hair damp from a quick wash, watching the sky stained pink over the training fields. "Good," he would say when we entered, expression easing. "The court can wait. My most important appointment has arrived. You say that where they can hear you?" I teased once, setting the pup down. Occasionally, he answered. It keeps their expectations manageable. We fell into a rhythm as natural as breathing. I measured out herbs and stitched bandages. He learned which salves stung and which did not by the set of the pup's ears. He showed me how to wrap a harness that would not chafe growing shoulders. I showed him how to recognize the subtle tremor that meant a nightmare was coming, so he could scoop Little Wolf up before the first cry. In the afternoons, when the pup napped in a patch of sunshine or dozed in my lap, Trevor asked questions. "Where does the light come from, Hilt?" He would ask, watching as I coaxed a faint glow into my palm to soothe the bruise. "I don't know," I admitted as I always did. "It's like asking where breath comes from. It just is. And you cannot pull it for harm." His brow furrowed. "Only for healing?" "I can choose what wound to reach for," I said. "But when I try to twist it toward anything else, it refuses. It burns me instead." I turned my hand, showing him the faint white scar along my wrist. I learned that when I was young, he frowned at the mark as if offended on my behalf. Then whoever said, "Your power makes you dangerous," never bothered to ask how it works. "No," I said softly. "They never did." He listened, truly listened, as I laid bare every aspect of my craft. In return, he explained the intricacies of pack law, how treaties were woven like cloth, how one frayed thread could weaken the whole. "The council fears what they cannot predict," he said one evening, as we watched Little Wolf tangle himself in a length of twine. "I do not blame them for that. But I will not let fear be the only voice in the room." He proved it again and again. I heard the arguments sometimes muffled through the council chamber doors when I passed. Words like precedent and risk and image floated out on sour air. Trevor's voice cut through all of them, calm, implacable, refusing. "Jasmine stays," he told them. "This is not up for debate. I should have been frightened by how much of his reputation he was taking on me." Instead, a strange warmth took root behind my ribs, growing each time he chose the harder path. He did not lock me away. On days when the pup was settled and another nurse could soothe him, Trevor took me beyond the palace walls. We walked through the market where vendors called greetings to their king and offered him bits of sugared bread or fresh fruit. He always shared them with me, and when possible with the pup nestled in a sling against my chest. "This is Mira," he said, introducing me to the baker who tucked extra loaves into refugee baskets. "She keeps half my warriors from fainting on the training field." Mira wiped flour on her apron and offered me a warm, cautious smile. "If you keep His Majesty in one piece," she said, "you're welcome at my stall any time." We visited the healer's wing, where some stared at me with open curiosity, others with quiet respect. Trevor did not force anyone's acceptance, but his presence at my side spoke volumes. "This is not a replacement," he told them as I walked through their wards, feeling the faint tug of their steady, trained magic. "She is another blade in our arsenal. Learn from her. Let her learn from you." Some did. They asked about my methods, my light, my limitations. I answered honestly. Little Wolf romped through the hall, stealing bandages and hearts with equal efficiency. In the evenings, we returned to the nursery, or sometimes to the small sitting room adjoining my new chambers. Little Wolf would sprawl across a pile of cushions, gnawing on a carved bone, while Trevor and I reviewed herb inventories or discussed the latest council maneuver as if we'd been doing it for years. I began to see the man beneath the crown. He laughed more easily in private, a low, warm sound that made something in my chest loosen. He apologized when he snapped and meant it. He listened to his people. truly listened, whether they were high-ranking advisors or stable hands worried about a sick mayor with the pup. He was nothing like the austere Alpha King. The court whispered about. He rolled on the floor, let little Wolf chew on his hair, and made ridiculous growling noises that sent the child into fits of delighted yips. He will never respect you if you let him win every wrestling match, I warned one night as Trevor lay on his back, feigning defeat while the pup stood triumphant on his chest. He will respect that I know when to yield, Trevor replied, eyes crinkling. It is a skill many forget. I watched him then, the easy affection in his hands. The way his entire face softened when the pup swiped a wet tongue across his nose. Something shifted inside me, subtle but sure. Gratitude blurred into admiration. Admiration melted into something deeper, warmer, more dangerous. I found myself wondering what it would feel like to have those hands cut my face, to have that softened gaze turned on me alone. Then I would shove the thought away, scolding myself for daring such foolishness. He was a king. I was an exile he had chosen to shelter. No matter how often he dismissed titles in private, no matter how many times he assured me I belonged here, the gulf between us still yawned wide in my mind. I had watched alphas bend to his will in council chambers, had seen war-hardened warriors bow their heads when he passed. The idea of him choosing me for anything beyond my healing felt like a story whispered to comfort lonely girls, not a future I could claim. At night, when the palace lay quiet and little Wolf snored at my feet, I lay awake and replayed small moments. Trevor's hand closing over mine when a counselor's words cut too close. The way his gaze sought mine first when entering a room, as if checking I was still there. The one time his fingers brushed a stray curl from my face, entirely by accident, and both of us froze for a heartbeat too long. Each memory sent a ripple of heat through me, followed by a cold wash of doubt. He trusts you, I reminded myself. He respects you. That is already more than you ever expected. Wanting more felt greedy, unfair, dangerous. So I held that longing where I held the light in the quiet hollow behind my ribs, where it could burn without consuming. I poured my days into the pup, and my evenings into learning this kingdom's rhythms. I let Trevor's presence become as familiar as the creak of the nursery rocking chair, as the soft padding of little Wolf's paws on stone. If my heart beat faster when his shoulder brushed mine, I told myself it was only the bond's sensitivity. If my gaze lingered on his mouth when he smiled, I blamed it on exhaustion. Yet sometimes, when the pup had finally collapsed between us, in a tangle of limbs, and the fire cast soft gold over Trevor's profile, I caught an echo of my own conflict in his eyes, a question he was not yet willing to ask aloud. We were growing closer step by cautious step, word by carefully chosen word. He was a king who had begun by protecting me out of duty, and now perhaps did so out of something more. I was a disgraced healer who had intended to stay only until a pup no longer needed her, yet found herself dreading the day he would not. I told myself that when that day came, I would leave with grace. I did not yet know that grace has little to do with love, and even less with the choices fate was quietly arranging for us both. The summons arrived at dawn, tucked beneath my breakfast cup, like a snake under a stone. By order of the High Council, it read in precise, unforgiving script. The healer Jasmine is requested to attend a formal inquiry regarding her continued presence within the royal palace. Requested as if there were any choice. Little Wolf nosed the parchment, sneezed, and trotted off with a chunk of bread in his mouth, blissfully unconcerned. I envied him that. Trevor found me in the nursery, the summons still folded in my hand. His eyes flicked to the seal, then to my face. They didn't even wait for the ink to dry, he muttered. You knew this was coming, I said. I did. He took the parchment, barely glancing at the words before tearing it cleanly in two. But they do not summon you. I do. And I asked you here long before they found the courage to put quill to paper. That courage now has teeth, I replied quietly. If I refuse to attend, they will say I have something to hide. His jaw worked, anger flickering like lightning behind his eyes. Then he exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders in a slow, controlled roll. Very well, he said. Then we go together. The council chamber was built to make wolves feel small. High ceilings arched overhead, painted with snarling wolves and blood-red moons. The long stone table curved in a half-circle. Council members seated like judges at some ancient trial. Banners of each allied pack hung behind them, their colors bright, their emblems severe. Whispers rippled through the room as Trevor and I entered side by side. "That's her. Look at the mark on her wrist. Lightbearer. They called her before they cast her out." I felt each word like grit against my skin. Little Wolf, forbidden from the chamber, waited with Trevor's sister in the hallway beyond. I could feel his faint restlessness through the bond, a muffled pacing at the edge of my thoughts. At the center of the curved table sat Lord Marius, spine straight as a spear. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing his head, "thank you for honoring our request for counsel." "This is not counsel," Trevor replied, taking his place at the head of the room. "This is a hearing you wish to hold about a woman who can hear every word you say about her." A few councillors shifted uneasily. Marius's expression did not change. "We are concerned," he said simply. "It is our duty to bring those concerns to you and to her." His gaze pinned me cool and sharp. "Jasmine, formerly of Rowan's pack," he began, voice ringing against stone. "We have heard many stories about you, that your magic is untested and unstable, that your former pack exiled you for practices they deemed dangerous, that your influence over both the young prince and our king is unusual." A murmur of agreement rolled through the chamber. "We are charged with the safety of this kingdom," another councillor added. "We cannot ignore an unknown variable in its heart." Unknown variable. I felt my fingers curl against my skirts. Trevor's voice cut across the swell of whispers. "She is not a variable," he said. "She is a person. You will remember that when you speak of her in my presence." Marius inclined his head, acknowledging the rebuke without retreating. "Then let us speak plainly," he said. "We question whether it is wise to allow a healer with her history unrestricted access to our future heir, or to you." He left hanging the accusation they didn't quite dare voice, that I might be twisting Trevor's choices with the same light I used to heal. Trevor's gaze slid to me, asking silently for patience. I nodded once. If he was willing to fight for me, I could at least give him the space to do it. "Let us examine your concerns," he said, returning his attention to the table. One by one, he stepped down from the raised dais, not looming above them, but standing among them, hands clasped loosely behind his back. "You say her magic is unproven?" he began. "Yet you sit in a fortress whose east wall still bears scorch marks from the last war, when enemy fire broke through our defenses, whose herbs kept our wounded from fever. Mira, the baker's daughter, now apprenticed in the healer's wing, who trained her to recognize infection before it took hold." Mira rose from a bench along the side wall, cheeks flushing. She hadn't told me she'd been summoned. "Jasmine did," she said, voice trembling, but clear. "She showed me how to brew the draught that saved half the wounded guards in the outer ward. If her methods were unstable," Trevor continued, "would we have fewer graves today or more?" "Silence!" No one rushed to answer. "As for her exile," Trevor went on, "we have only one side of that tale, the side of those who cast her out. I have heard the other. A healer begged to perform a miracle, punished when she succeeded too well. That is her account," Marius said. "We cannot verify, can we not?" Trevor's tone sharpened. "We have traitors who passed through her homeland. Records of their elders' sudden recovery. Rumors of fear, yes, but not of harm. No tales of patients killed, of magic misused, only of a council frightened by what they did not control." He gestured to the chamber doors. "If you doubt her skill, ask the farmers whose sick children now run through the fields, because she chose to treat them, though they had nothing to pay. Ask the stable master whose mare would have died foing if not for her light. They are here." I turned, startled, to see faces I recognized in the gallery above a farmer couple. The stable master, two guards whose shattered ribs I had mended. They had dressed in their best clothes, hands twisted together, eyes bright and nervous. "I called for character witnesses," Trevor said. "Not from courts or councils, but from those whose lives have changed because she was here. Do you wish to hear them?" It was not really a question. Still, protocol demanded the council murmur agreement. One by one, they spoke. "She didn't ask whose pack I'd been born into," the stable master said. Only what hurt. My daughter had been sick for weeks, the farmer's wife whispered. Our own healer did what he could, but the fever wouldn't break. Jasmine sat up all night with her, hand on her brow, and by morning the fever was gone. She heals even the ones who glare at her, one of the guards said, casting a rueful glance at the scowling counselor. Does it matter where she comes from if my lungs can hold air again? Their words tightened my throat. I gripped the edge of my sleeve, forcing myself to stay still. When their testimonies faded, Marius folded his hands. No one disputes she has been useful, he said. But usefulness is not the same as safety. You cannot deny that the bond between her and your nephew is unprecedented. If she were to leave, she hasn't, Trevor said. And she won't until he no longer needs her. That is her choice, not mine. His gaze swept the table. You fear that I am compromised by gratitude, that I see her through the eyes of a man whose family was nearly broken, not as a king weighing risk. He took a step closer to their half-circle, and his voice dropped. Let me be very clear, he said. I have weighed it. I have considered every argument you made before you found the courage to speak them aloud. And still I say this, sending her away would be the greater danger. How? Another counselor demanded. Explain that, sire. If we cast out a healer who saved our heir, what message does that send to the Pax? Trevor asked. Tell that we value fear over loyalty, that anyone who shows unusual strength will be punished, not guided. How many gifts will be buried rather than honed? How many allies will look at this palace and see not justice, but cowardice dressed in velvet? No one answered. And there is this, he added. My nephew lives. He laughs. He will grow because she chose to break a vow that never should have been required of her. Any kingdom that cannot find room in its heart for that miracle is not one I wish to rule. A flush crept up Marius's neck. You place great weight on one woman, he said. Trevor's eyes cooled. I place great weight on my own judgment, he corrected, which, as you seem to require reminding, is what you are here to advise not to replace. The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples of unease down the table. If you say she stays, Marius said carefully, we will obey, but we must be able to question. You may question policies, strategies, even my temper on a bad day, Trevor interrupted. You do not question whether I understand whom I invite under my roof. When you imply that I have been ensnared, misled, or otherwise fooled, you are not merely insulting her. You are insulting me, and that, he said softly, I will not tolerate. The room went very, very still. I watched him then not as a healer, not as an exile, but as a woman seeing a man choose where to stand when lines were drawn. He did not look at me as he spoke. He didn't need to. His defense did not rely on my reaction. It was rooted in his own sense of right. Marius bowed his head, the movement stiff. Forgive us, sire, he said. Our concern outstripped our trust. We did not mean to undermine your authority. Yet you did, Trevor replied. Let this be the last time you attempt to protect this kingdom by tearing down those who have risked themselves for it. His gaze swept the table one final time. Jasmine stays, he said. She will continue to care for my nephew and assist our healers. Any who attempt to harass or isolate her will answer to me directly. Are we clear? One by one, the counselors nodded. Some grudgingly, some with genuine acceptance. Marius's nod was the smallest, but it was there. Then this hearing is over, Trevor concluded. He turned, his eyes finding mine at last. In them, I saw no hint of regret, only a question. Are you all right? I managed to nod, unsure if my voice would hold, if I tried to answer aloud. My pulse thundered, not from fear, but from something fierce and stunned and painfully bright. In a hall built to make wolves feel small, Trevor had stood unapologetically at my side and told the kingdom that my worth was not up for debate. As we stepped out of the chamber together, Little Wolf barreled into my legs, whining in relief. I scooped him up, pressing my face into his fur to hide the wetness in my eyes. Over his head, Trevor's fingers brushed my elbow, a brief touch, steadying. Thank you, I whispered. His mouth curved. You're the one who keeps saving lives, he said. I am only catching up. But the echo of his voice in that chamber, calm and unyielding, stayed with me long after the doors closed. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like something merely tolerated. I felt claimed not as property, not as obligation, but as someone worth standing up for. The palace gardens were quieter than the halls, but they were not silent. Crickets sang in the hedges, water whispered over stone in the nearest fountain. Above the moon hung low and full, bathing the paths in silver. I walked between rows of night-blooming flowers, their pale petals glowing faintly, and tried to unknot the tangle in my chest. The hearing had ended hours ago, yet my pulse still echoed with every word. Dangerous, exile, unknown. And then Trevor's voice, calm and unshakable, cutting through it all. Jasmine stays. I sank onto a stone bench beneath an arch of climbing roses and pressed my hands together until my knuckles ached. The scent of damp earth and petals wrapped around me thick and sweet. It should have been soothing. Instead, my thoughts turned in tight, frantic circles. He had risked so much. His council's favor, his carefully balanced alliances, his reputation as a measured, strategic king. All for me, a healer the world had once deemed too dangerous to keep. The more I replayed it, the more one truth settled like a stone in my stomach. I could not let him keep paying that price. You look like you're planning an escape. His voice came from the shadows, wry and gentle. I jumped, spinning on the bench. Trevor stepped into the moonlight, hands empty, expression unreadable. I didn't hear you, I said foolishly. That was the idea. He stopped a few paces away, as if wary of crowding me. I thought you might want a moment without walls listening. I came here to think, I admitted. Did it help? Yes. I drew a breath that tasted of roses and fear. It helped me decide I should leave. The words hung between us. Sharp and sudden. His jaw tightened. Is that so? I'm causing too much trouble. I rushed on before courage failed. Your council sees me as a threat. Other packs will too. Today you silence them. But how long before they decide your loyalty to me is a weakness to exploit? I won't be the stone that cracks your foundation. His brows drew together, anger flaring not at me, I realized, but at the thought. You listened to the same hearing I did, he said. Did you hear me say at any point that I considered you a burden? No, I whispered, but I heard what it cost you to keep me. He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head almost in disbelief. You truly think leaving would make it easier? It wasn't a question. Yes. And what of my nephew? He asked quietly. Will you take him with you when you go, or leave him to cry himself sick in these halls again? Pain lanced through me. You know I wouldn't. Exactly. He stepped closer, eyes dark in the moonlight. You would haunt yourself with every whimper, every nightmare you weren't there to soothe. You would blame yourself for wounds you never caused. That might still be better than watching you risk your crown, I said, voice cracking. Silence stretched. The fountain murmured. Somewhere a nighty bird called Trevor closed the last of the distance between us. Stand up, he said softly. I blinked. Why? Because I'm tired of speaking down to you when we have this conversation. There was something in his tone that begged no argument. Not command exactly, but an invitation I could not refuse. I rose, the stone bench cool against my calves. We were close now, almost too close. I could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, carved by years of responsibility. Listen to me, Jasmine, he said. My council's displeasure is not your sin to atone for. Their fear is not your debt to pay. I chose to stand in that chamber today. I would choose it again tomorrow. Why? The word tore out of me. Why keep choosing me when it would be so much easier not to? He looked at me as if the answer were the simplest thing in the world. Because somewhere between finding you in that forest cottage and watching you hold my nephew, as if the world could not touch him while he slept, he said, I fell in love with you. The garden went silent. The crickets, the fountain, the whisper of leaves, all of it faded beneath the roaring in my ears. I stared at him. Certain I had misheard. You what? In love? He repeated with the steady patience he used when explaining complex treaties. Not because of your magic, though I have never seen anything more beautiful. Not because of some bond or prophecy or destiny. Because of you He lifted a hand slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. When I didn't, his fingers brushed a damp curl from my cheek. "I watched you risk exile's safety a second time to save a dying pup," he said. "I watched you sit up night after night, bones aching, so he would never wake alone. I watched you walk into that council chamber today, knowing they saw you as a threat, and stand tall anyway." His thumb traced a line just below my jaw, not quite a caress. "You are compassionate and strong and stubbornly kind, even when the world has not been kind to you. How could I not love you?" My eyes burned. "Trevor, I know what you think," he went on, voice softer now, "that you are an exile, and I am a king, that there is a gulf between us, too wide to cross. But when I look at you, I do not see your old council's verdict. I see the woman who reminded mine what justice looks like." He took my hand then carefully, as if it were something fragile and precious. His palm was warm against mine, cold from training, yet his grip was gentle. "I am not here as your king tonight," he said. "I am here as a man asking a woman if she will allow him to court her properly, openly at her pace." I searched his face for any sign of pressure, any hint of expectation edged with command. There was none, only hope, and a threat of fear so similar to my own, it stole my breath. "I won't bind you with rank or obligation," he promised. "If you say no, you will still have a place here for as long as you wish it, and my nephew will still crawl into your lap, and my council will still know better than to speak your name with anything less than respect." His fingers tightened around mine, just once. "But if you say yes, then I will spend every day proving that your trust is not a mistake." The moonlight blurred as tears filled my eyes. I had imagined many things in the lonely hours after exile. Scorn, fear, wary tolerance. Never this. Never a king admitting his heart with the same steady conviction he brought to battle plans. "I don't know if I can be what you deserve," I whispered. "I am still learning how not to flinch when someone says my name in a crowded room." "Then we will learn together," he said. "I am still learning how to be a king who chooses compassion over convenience. Perhaps we make a fitting pair." A shaky laugh escaped me. Little Wolf's presence brushed faintly against my mind from his distant room, warm and content, as if he somehow sensed the shift in the air. "Let me be clear," Trevor said. "I am asking Jasmine, not demanding, not claiming, asking, will you give me the chance to earn your love?" The choice lay before me, like two paths, in the moonlit garden, one leading back to the safety of half-believed doubts, the other into unknown, terrifying, beautiful possibility. I thought of his voice in the council chamber unwavering, of his hands cradling his nephew, of the way he had listened when I spoke of my magic, not with fear, but with genuine curiosity, of the warmth that had been growing in my chest for weeks, fragile and persistent as a seed cracking stone. "Yes," I heard myself say. "If you are still willing when I'm afraid and stubborn and certain I don't deserve you, then yes, you may court me." Relief broke across his face like sunrise. "Good," he murmured. He did not pull me into his arms, did not seize the moment like a victor claiming spoils. He only brought our joined hands to his lips and pressed a reverent kiss to my knuckles. "We will go slowly, Vissa," he said. "On your terms." And we did. The months that followed reshaped the palace. Trevor and I worked side by side, expanding the healer's wing, opening its doors to wolves from smaller packs, inviting those with unusual gifts to train rather than hide. Little Wolf grew, weaving compassion into the bones of the court, until even the most rigid counselor learned to bend, if only a little. He tumbled through council chambers, scattering papers and solemnity with equal ease. He napped under my work, teeth on my bootlaces, and stole Trevor's quills from his desk. When he shifted for the first time, small and wobbly in his human skin, he ran straight to us, clutching my skirts with one hand and Trevor's tunic with the other. 6 months after the hearing, on a clear night, when the stars spilled thick across the sky, Trevor led me back to the garden where he had first confessed. "No council summons this time," he said lightly. "Only mine." We stood beneath the arch of roses, their blooms now heavy and full. Little Wolf slept inside, watched over by half the palace who claimed the privilege. The air smelled of summer and new beginnings. "I made you a promise," Trevor said quietly, "that I would never mistake choice for fate." He cupped my face in his hands. giving me time to step back. I didn't, Jasmine, he whispered. May I kiss you? Yes, I breathed. The first brush of his mouth against mine was not a claim. It was a vow. Gentle, reverent, threaded with all the conversations and shared nights and quiet moments that had brought us here. I curled my fingers into his shoulders and felt the steady thrum of his heartbeat under my palms, matching my own. When we parted, foreheads resting together, the world felt both vast and achingly intimate. We did not build a life because destiny demanded it. We built it piece by deliberate piece, through choices made in council chambers and nurseries, in gardens and crowded halls, through apologies and compromises, through laughter and late-night arguments and morning reconciliations. Little Wolf grew strong and happy, racing through the palace courtyards with other pups. His bond to me, a steady, comforting hum, rather than a desperate tether. He became living proof that the night I broke my vow in a lonely cottage had not doomed anyone. It had saved us all. Sometimes when the court grew loud and the weight of my past pressed close, Trevor would take my hand and squeeze once, quietly reminding me I was not here because of obligation. I was here because we had chosen one another again and again. And in the end, light and crowns and rumors aside, that choice turned out to be the most powerful magic of all. Now it's your turn. Where are you listening or reading from? And what has been your favorite moment in Jasmine and Trevor's story? So děkuji vám, že jste poslouchali až do konce tohoto videa. Opravdu si vážím každého okamžiku, který jste zde se mnou strávili. V tuto chvíli směřujeme k dosažení prvního milníku, 1000 odběratelů. Pokud se vás mé příběhy alespoň trochu dotkly, prosím podpořte mě kliknutím na tlačítko odebírat subscribe. Každý váš odběr je pro mě obrovskou motivací pokračovat v psaní a přinášet další hodnotné příběhy. Uvidíme se v příštím videu.